Chapter 3. Preparing for Battle. June 1941. Early each morning, Maria and I headed for the Hermitage. As gallery after gallery was emptied of its treasures, Comrade Orbelli insisted that the empty frames be replaced on the walls. "It will make it easier to put back the pictures," Maria said, and I could see that in her heart, however long the war took, it would not be over for Maria until the moment the pictures were safely back in their frames. I was assigned to help in the loading and unloading of the trucks that carted the works of art to railroad cars, which pleased me because I was no longer cooped up in the museum, and besides, it paid more money. Riding on the trucks gave me a chance to see what was going on in the city. It looked as if a mad wizard had waved his hand over Leningrad, turning it into a shabby forest. All the important buildings were camouflaged with green netting. The party leaders had been quick to think of themselves, for the first nets were cast over the Communist Party headquarters at Smolny. When Mama saw the net, she said, "I wish they would draw that net tight and throw the whole building and all those in it into the Neva." The party made a bargain with the devil when it joined with Germany, and now it is surprised to see the devil turn on it. One by one, buildings were erased by the camouflage nets. Even the column with the angel on the square in the front of the Winter Palace was draped with netting. When it came to the spire of the Admiralty, everyone was stumped. No one could figure out how to get to the top, so that the gold spire, glistening so invitingly in the sun, could be painted out. They even tried to have an anti-aircraft balloon drop a rope ladder onto the tower, but nothing worked. It was dangerous to leave it shining there, for the spire would serve as a guidepost for the German bombers. At first, there was no shortage of food, and Mama filled the cupboard. She no longer talked about not taking more than our share. "I have been hungry, Georgie, and I know what it's like." She took a part of our savings and bought a Burzuka, maybe? A little stove that was fired with small pieces of wood. I remembered such a stove in the house in which we had lived in Dudenka when Mama was exiled to Siberia. "Why do we need a Burzuka, Mama, when we already have a stove to cook on and our apartment is heated?" "That is now, Georgie. Wait and see." Stranger still was what Mama did with bread. You could buy as much as you liked, and Mama strung slices on a cord and hung the necklace of slices in a sunny window to dry. When Olga saw them, she teased Mama, "Who will eat your dried rusks when we have fresh bread to eat?" Olga was working longer hours, for the radio symphony had been called upon to broadcast patriotic music hour after hour. The Leningrad Symphony had been sent out of the city to protect the musicians. The radio symphony in which Olga played was now the city's only orchestra. The musicians had even had a little raise in pay, and with her extra money, Olga had bought a new dress and shoes. When she brought them to show us, Mama smiled. "Very pretty, but you will regret those high heels. You had better take them back and exchange them for sturdy shoes, or better yet, food." "You are a pessimist, Katya," Olga said, and twirled around in her new dress and high heels. Mama bought sugar and fruit and filled every jar she had with preserves. When the first cabbages were ripe, she put them in a pickling brine. "The way they did it at the Oaks," she said. The Oaks had been my grandmother's country estate, and my mother had told us stories of fields of grain so vast you could not see to the end of them, and a great house that had been burned down during the Revolution. One evening, Andre stopped by. Maria had seen little of him, for he was busy at staff headquarters day and night. We were sitting around the kitchen table listening to the radio. The orchestra was playing the Fifth Symphony by Shostakovich, Russia's great composer who lived right in Leningrad. Maria said, "Olga told me that Shostakovich is working on an important piece that will celebrate Leningrad's victory." Andre was no longer the cheerful man he had been. Now he had a troubled face and bad news. "If Shostakovich is writing about a victory, he knows something I don't. There is even a rumor that he is to be flown to Moscow to get him out of danger should the Germans march into the city." "Andre," Mama said, "surely it's not as bad as that." "Yes, I'm afraid it is. Our army is retreating everywhere. The 11th and the 8th armies are coming apart. In some of the units, half of the men are casualties." Andre knew of my wish, and now he gave me a warning look. "Count your lucky stars that you are too young to join up, Georgie." In a frightened voice, Maria said, "Andre, will you have to go to the front?" "No such luck. Everything is chaos here at headquarters. I'm working 20 hours a day trying to find food and ammunition for the soldiers." It was the same chaos under the Tsar in the Great War, Mama said, and it led to the revolution. Maybe this war will lead to a change in the government, and this time for the better. I've heard a rumor that political prisoners in the camps are being released to join the army. At least they are getting their freedom. Andre nodded. Yes, it's true, but will they live long enough to enjoy it? The next day, when my friend Dmitri and I were walking along the prospect, I told him what Andre said. He wouldn't believe me. "Look here." He shoved an article in Leningradskaya Pravda under my nose. "It says right here in the newspaper that the Russian army is turning back the Germans." "That's how much you know. You're stupid to believe what the newspaper says." I remembered too late that Dmitri's brother Vladimir was a reporter for the paper. "You're not patriotic," Dmitri shouted. "What can you expect from someone whose parents were enemies of the people and exiled to Siberia?" I hit him on the nose. He hit me back. I felt a loose tooth and there was blood on my fist. I don't know what would have happened next, but suddenly, all around us, we saw people running. I think we were glad of an excuse to stop the fight and began to run after them. They were headed for the Admiralty. "They're going to climb the tower," someone shouted. For days there had been rumors that several mountain climbers were going to make the attempt to camouflage the Admiralty Tower. Their pictures appeared in the Leningradskaya Pravda. One of the climbers was a music teacher for Sova. "Why, I know her," Yelena had said. "She's a friend of Mama's." Now it was going to happen. Half of the city watched the mountain climbers make their slow way up the tower. We were all holding our breath. When at last they reached the top, we all let out a cheer. The climbers took out paintbrushes and began to cover the bright gold with dark paint. When they were safely down, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but I couldn't help but be sad that the shining gold that had brightened the city's sky for so long had disappeared. Our fight was forgotten, and Dmitri and I continued down the prospect with some idea of looking to see what ships were docked. Dmitri didn't apologize, but he bought 2 ice creams on a stick and gave me one. We sat on the river's edge eating our ice cream. "Vladimir is going to the front," Dmitri said. "He's going to be a war correspondent." I understood why I had made him angry. Even if his brother wasn't a soldier, Dmitri was worried about his brother going off to war. "He'll write the truth," I said, trying to be polite. "But they won't print it," Dmitri said, trying to be honest. While I was stuck at the Hermitage, everyone else appeared to be going off to the war. In spite of what he had said, Andre was transferred to the front, and for days Maria went about with a gloomy face. Sometimes I would awaken in the middle of the night to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of tea. In spite of his old age, Victor was also going off to the front. A call had gone out for volunteers. The German army was moving rapidly north. Thousands of workers were needed to dig a last line of defense to keep armies from crossing the Luga River. Once they crossed the Luga, which was less than 100 miles from Leningrad, the German army could join with the Finns and make a circle around Leningrad. Except for Lake Ladoga on the northeast, we would be ringed around, closed in as surely as if a fence encircled us. No food or help could come, and we could not escape. We would be rats in a trap. "They'll never get past the Luga," Victor said. "Thousands are going down there to dig ditches and build hills to keep the tanks out. You'll see." He marched off with the others, with Olga running after him to give him his carpet slippers and a bottle of wine. Even those with jobs were expected to put in 3 hours of patriotic work each day. Mama chose to unload wood from the barges coming from Finland, although the barges were bringing less and less. The people of Finland hated Russia for invading their country and taking it over. When they saw our soldiers marching south to stop the advancing German army, leaving Finland undefended, the Finns saw a chance to rebel against their old enemy, Russia. At first I argued with Mama, for unloading the barges was heavy work, especially after a day at the hospital, but each day she brought home a stick or two concealed in her jacket. The small sticks were piled neatly in the kitchen next to the little bursuka. "For the day they are needed," Mama said. For my 3 hours of patriotic work, I joined Dmitri and hundreds of others digging air raid shelters in the summer garden. Though our hands were covered with blisters and our backs ached, Dmitri and I took to tunneling like moles. I had a daydream that one of the soldiers who oversaw the work would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Such a hard worker should be in the army. Never mind how old you are. There is a place for you." It never happened. Something even more remarkable happened. One afternoon, as we were flinging dirt over our shoulders, we noticed a small, neatly dressed man with glasses handling the shovel as if he had no idea what a shovel was for. While I thrust my foot against my own shovel and pried it into the hard earth, the man hardly made a dent in the ground. When he saw me staring at him, he gave me a smile so apologetic, I could not resist going over to him with a view to showing him how to angle the shovel and how to force it into the ground with a little help from his foot. "I'm afraid I'm useless at this," he said. He was looking at his hands, which were soft and white and now covered with cruel blisters. "Look, make your foot do the work, and that will save your hands." I slammed my foot against the shovel to give him the lesson. "Oh, so that's the way," he said, and tried it out with his own shovel. There was something familiar about his face. "Prostitute?" Y'all, I'm bad at these words. "I beg your pardon, but what work did you do before the war?" I asked. "I work a little with music," he said, and turned back to his shovel. I looked at him again and turned beet red. It was Dmitri Shostakovich, the great composer. Prostier, I mumbled. I had no idea. I couldn't help myself from asking, "What are you doing here?" "I tried to get into the army, but my eyesight kept me out." "I know how you feel," I said. "With me, it's my age." By now, several people had recognized him. They began to crowd around us. Shostakovich looked nervously about and then, clasping his shovel, hurried away. When I went back to Dmitri, he asked, "Who was that funny little man?" "That funny little man was just the greatest composer in Russia." Dmitri refused to believe me. In the early evening, as we left the summer garden, I saw Shostakovich from a distance. He was using his foot to good effect. Dmitri grinned. "There is your great composer," he said. "Now will you admit you made a mistake?" What would Shostakovich be doing with the shovel? Olga believed me at once. "Yes, I have heard. He has worked as an air raid warden and is now working as a laborer, but every minute he is away from his piano and his desk is a terrible waste." "He wants to do his part," I said. "He is writing a great symphony for our city. That is work enough. Why should he dirty his hands?" Olga was so upset I said nothing more, but I understood what he was doing. It must have been very lonely for him there in his study. He was writing about Leningrad, and he wanted to be a part of the city. Though I looked each afternoon, I never saw Shostakovich again. I guessed that some of the officials felt the way Olga did, and the composer was confined to his study. It was impossible to recognize the summer garden as the same place where only weeks before I had chased Yelena among the trees. There were ugly piles of dirt from the air raid excavations, the fountains were boarded up, and the statues had been taken down and laid to rest under the ground like so many of dead people. The rose garden and flower beds had been torn out by the roots to make the shelters. It was no longer a garden, but a muddy scene of destruction. The shelters we were building were to protect us, but the craters we were digging made the summer garden look like it had already been bombed. And not only the summer garden, but all the parks. The beauty of the city was gone. The bronze horses on the Anikov Bridge were underground, and saddest of all, the bronze horseman, the impressive statue of Peter the Great, had been covered with sandbags. In school, we had all learned Pushkin's poem, The Bronze Horseman, and its terrible story of the Leningrad flood of 1824, with coffins from the graveyards floating in the streets. When I told Yelena the poem scared me to death the first time I read it, she said, "A sign of a great poem." With its buried statues, its camouflaged nets and gray paint, and its ruined parks, I no longer recognized my city. As I always did when I was discouraged, I took my worry to Yelena. Somehow she always found a way to cheer me. How, I asked her, will Leningrad ever be the same again? For an answer, she wrote a poem. "Seed the earth with people burrowing beneath the ground, in air raid shelters and trenches, with spring will come the resurrection." I guess she meant eventually everything would be all right, only it looked to me as if it might take a while.